If you stay up too late, or if you leave your cabin past curfew, you just might see the doctor.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a newish horror movie that just came to VOD. It's called Marshmallow. There's a lot to like about this film, but other stuff I think in concept is a lot better than the actual execution. What the movie's about, you have this kid named Morgan, and he's clearly a social outcast. He's bullied, he's picked on, he doesn't have a lot of friends, and he is sent off to summer camp. And when he gets there, he already does not fit in from the moment he arrives. But one night, when all of the kids are around the fire, somebody tells an urban legend or a summer camp tale of this guy named the Doctor. And what he does, this is actually pretty diabolical. He is called the Doctor because he's a doctor by day, but they went on to find an experiment going on in his basement where he tied the limbs of his family together to keep them together forever. That is one of the most disgusting and alarming ones I've ever heard in the film, but that's the urban legend anyways. And as this movie goes on, we go on to find out through Morgan that this urban legend is actually true at Camp Almer, and the Doctor is real. He's out in the middle of the night and nobody will believe him. Now let me start off with what I actually enjoyed about this film. I think this movie does really capture the summer camp vibe. It did make me feel like those old school 80s movies, Friday the 13th, where you just have a bunch of kids going away to get rehabilitated or learn something about adolescence. I really enjoyed the vibe and the cinematography of this movie in the dark woods. And on top of that, whenever you have a movie, especially a camp movie that is centralized around a bunch of younger kids, you are really running the risk, as I always indicate, that the kids just cannot act. I don't think that's the case in this film. I think for being a predominantly young adult cast, I think it is really well acted. I think Morgan, I think his friend group, well above average for these movies that include a bunch of kids. So I have to point that out. I think the acting is not a limitation, and that alone is a plus in a movie with a lot of kids. And as simple as he looks, I actually really enjoyed the costume of the Doctor, this guy the urban legend is based off of. For a slasher at a summer camp, you need a cool killer. You need somebody who looks good. And it's very simple, as I said. It's just a guy in scrubs with a doctor's outfit, but it fits into the way this movie looks and the environment. And I think it was a standout kind of eerie atmospheric killer to put into a slasher. And then lastly, for my positives, and I'll get into this a little bit more after my formal rating when I talk a couple of spoilers. I love the ambition of this movie. Again, this is a movie where you go into it expecting one thing. I was expecting just a summer camp slasher with kids. It ends up being a lot weirder and a lot more than that, believe me, but I like the ambitious swings this movie takes. Do they all work? No. But I always commend the movie that at least takes chances and they explain and explore those chances, more so than being ambiguous and just doing things for the sake of doing things. This movie feels like it was made for a purpose, and I like that. But what I did not enjoy about this, I thought it was pretty slow, at least the first half of this. I was kind of ready to dump on this thing after the first 30-40 minutes, but it really picks up in the second half, and I had a lot better time. Halo 2 halves. First half of this film, 2 out of 10. Second half of this film, 7 out of 10, pretty strong. But it takes a good while to get going, and they do that thing where they're doing these exposition flashbacks that make absolutely no sense until the point it is clarified in the grand reveal. And I know some people love that. Some movies are doing that now. I don't really like that as a form of exposition because there's no possible way you could connect the dots from these vague visions and whatever these flashbacks are that just feel out of place. They tonally don't mesh with the rest of the movie. Every time you have a dream sequence or a nightmare that's trying to illustrate something that will eventually make sense, it doesn't make any sense in the moment at all, and it takes you out of it. At least that's how I work with these films. So I really don't like the creative choice to do so many flashbacks and so much weird imagery that just kind of blends with the overall story. I think this movie getting to the weird conclusion we end up getting to would have just been better if it was told start to finish without so much ambiguous imagery thrown into it to try to give you this visceral response. When we get answers, it makes sense anyways. We didn't need all of that. And then second, I kind of think the killer aspect of this movie is underutilized. I understand when the explanation comes why it goes the way it does, but when you find out who this guy is and what's going on at the camp, it didn't feel like it ever got to that point I want to get to when it comes to a slasher at a summer camp. Felt a little bit toned down, and that's just my personal preference. Again, if the payoff really works for you, it probably won't matter. For me, I wanted a little bit more meat on the bones getting to that point. The very last thing is I actually predicted where this movie was going. I know a lot of people, probably the vast majority, will be absolutely dumbfounded by where this movie ends up going, but I actually caught on to it because there is a Black Mirror episode that is very similar to this movie. And I started noticing similarities in the way these flashbacks were put together. Again, I don't really think they add to being able to figure out what's going on, but there is enough there if you've seen similar source material, because something seems off with the way this movie keeps moving along. So overall, I did find this to be a pretty strange film, but one I kind of recommend because of its ambition. I understand why it's getting the hype it is, but at the same time, I feel like execution does matter. And when we get to the end of the film and what's actually explained, I don't think it was done as well as it could have been, so I can't give it glaring reviews. Second half of this movie, when it starts to get ambition and it starts to take chances, I thought it was very entertaining. I thought the killer design was really cool. I thought the route it chooses to go is unique, even though I was able to figure it out. And overall, I had a good time with this film, and I understand why people were talking about it. But anyways, getting into my brief spoiler talk of what this movie is about. So this movie has gotten glaring reviews and just super buzz on Twitter and on the internet in general, because people are always looking for that next hidden gem that nobody really knows what's going on. If it was more mainstream, I think people would not be talking about this because it would be way easier to figure out. The fact that it is such an unknown, ambiguous movie really feeds into the plot and what they're trying to do in general. So basically what you have actually happening in this movie is you have this kid going away to summer camp. When these kids figure out the doctor is actually real, things do a complete 180 and it turns into a full-fledged camp slasher. At that point, I was having a good time and I thought things were really picking up, but something weird going on is the doctor is going around and shocking everybody, not killing them. And that is because what is actually going on at this summer camp, all of the kids are actually dead. This is kind of a ripoff of one of these Black Mirror episodes where they have taken your ideas or your memories or just built like a composite of you, and that is how these people exist. It's like a synthetic AI robot version of these kids because the real versions of them already died years ago. And this is their way to provide closure to families. And every single year, these kids go away to summer camp. And the reason they do that is so they can fine-tune the kids. And I thought this was actually a pretty genius and smart little twist. They do not know up until this point they are not real, they are not alive. So going to summer camp every year, this is how you can tweak and program them. You can add more hair to them. You can give them a couple of inches of growth. You can teach them new things because they are kind of stuck as whoever they are. But going away to summer camp, and they kind of elaborate on this a little bit more, this is how you would get away from society and program these without anybody knowing or the immersion breaking. And I really liked that element. That's why I think this is a very strong movie when it comes to the story twist and the narrative, because I've seen things like that done in Black Mirror. I've never seen it explained and done like this. I thought that was very clever. And they even go on to explain a little bit more. When these kids will get older, they'll go away to things like college trips and they'll go away on vacations, and there will always be a reason to relocate around these camps or these places that can do this programming and can evolve them. Kind of makes you think for a moment, am I a robot? Is that how my whole life has been? Because I've been looking forward to vacations as well. The program they are participating in just starts kind of going rogue and attacking humans, and it becomes an absolute bloodbath. So I understand why people like this film a lot, honestly. Again, it's not really my thing. I did enjoy it for what it was. I don't know if I would ever rewatch this movie, but we'll say definitely not what I expected. When I turned this on, I thought I was getting a traditional camp slasher. The poster does say question everything, so I guess I was warned. But if you're still here and you wanted to hear those spoiler thoughts, thanks for sticking around. As always, join me down below. I love talking movies with you. I will see you in the next review. Peace!